quarter life calling. And it really comes back to the conversations we have had so often about millennials. Because if you're aware of that, the millennial generation really is raising fundamental questions about meaning and calling and work and those kinds of things. That's why every Wednesday we have our Millennial Roundtable. And this Wednesday we'll have Nick Pitts and Chelsea Yeoman joining us. And in the past we've had Ali Bestucky and many other people really addressing some of those issues that millennials are considering. Well, in the past, you've oftentimes heard us talk about the fact that sometimes people, maybe in their 30s and 40s, go through kind of a midlife reevaluation. Sometimes it's called a midlife crisis. We've talked about halftime, where some individuals spend the first half of their life really trying to get success and spend the last half of their life focusing on significance. But this book says, maybe some of those reevaluation points happen much earlier. And so this is why I wanted you to know about this book, to get copies of it, to pass it on to your friends. And for those of you in ministry, it certainly seems to be one of those books that you need to know more about, and one of the individuals that we're going to have a chance to interview that you need more about. His name is Paul Sohn, and he is an individual that has really been working with 20-somethings and now even 30-somethings to really understand their God-given identity and calling. He's an award-winning blogger, a leadership coach and speaker. His blog has been ranked many times in the top 50 leadership blogs to follow. Christianity Today a while back named him as one of the top 33 under 33 Christian millennials to watch. So, Paul, welcome to Point of View.
Thanks for having me here.
Let's, if we can, start with your story, because you begin that, and you were the all-American success story. Did well in school, did well with a major business. You, from every possible indicator, were very successful. But you also said you were quite miserable. Tell us more.
Yeah, so all my life, I've kind of your path. Growing up in a household where there was a lot of expectation to succeed and comparing myself to a lot of successful people, I've always pursued the American dream. But when I got into my dream job, working at the Fortune 50 company, I felt that would deliver the ultimate happiness in life. But in fact, I felt it more wanting. I felt there was something missing, a sense of emptiness, kind of meaninglessness that I kind of felt, which I couldn't really detect until the honeymoon phase went by. And after 6 months to a year and 2 years going by, I started to really feel like I'm going through this daily grind and feeling like, is this really what I'm called to do? Is this really my purpose in life? So those were some of the questions I started to ask about myself.
Well, and we're going to be talking about calling, and one of the interviews that we've done in the past is the book The Call by Os Guinness. I know that was very influential. But you came to a point where you decided, rather than just continue to gut it out, or maybe even say, I don't know, maybe I need to just sublimate these feelings, you decided to quit a Fortune 50 job in order to pursue your calling. Can you share for just a minute the reactions from people that were around you when you did something which is pretty remarkable?
Well, I can kind of laugh at it right now, but at that time it was, a pretty big thing, because many of my friends, my colleagues would call this a corporate suicide, because so many people would die to go and work for a company like this. But, all my life I've, pursued this, but feeling so empty, I've decided to quit my job. So I had to go through a lot of just resistance. I mean, even from my parents, who were really worried about me, and obviously they had the best intentions for me, and being able to kind of talk through them around this process of going through a quarter-life crisis, and really replacing that by finding out what is my calling in life, what is the vision that God has given me in my life, and how I have a plan to get to fulfill that vision. So it's had a lot of conversations with my parents, a lot of conversations with my pastor or mentors and coaches. And, it wasn't always so easy, but, thankfully there were what I call the board of directors, my personal board of directors, who really helped me go through this process well by asking me really hard questions that helped me to reevaluate my assumptions about life and my purpose and vision.
Well, again, this is a good time as we're in the summer right now for people to kind of reevaluate lots of things. It could be where their kids go to school. It could be their career. It could be their ministry. And a lot of it ties into this idea of calling. I mentioned Os Guinness's book, which I highly recommend, The Call. But when we're talking about calling, Paul, explain exactly what you mean by that, because it's something we're going to be talking about for the entire hour.
Right. So calling, I see calling as God's personal invitation to work on his agenda by unleashing all of what I have that God's given me to glorify God. So it's part of leveraging my strengths, my personality. It's also utilizing the God-induced passions and my entire life story in order to work on God's agenda instead of my agenda. So that's a really holistic definition of how I define calling.
You know, some people might say, well, if I'm in the ministry, obviously I'm fulfilling my calling, but it's possible God could call you out of the ministry. God could call you in the ministry. But I know enough about you and reading your book to know that you understand that everything we do, in a sense, is ministry. Everything we do essentially is worship, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's a huge thing that I really emphasize in my book because, like you said, Kirby, like I think a lot of people think that, oh, if you are called to ministry, you have a God-given calling, but those who are the engineers or accountants or people who are, who are doing things outside of the church context, their calling seems to be more inferior. And a lot of churches and pastors, they have good intentions, but they're trying to say, oh, you got to be the missionary, you got to go to seminary, and you got to pursue vocational ministry to be called. And it creates this this hierarchy of callings, which is something that I believe the Bible does not teach, because everybody is called, and there is a primary calling and there is a secondary calling, which Os Guinness talks about in his book, and I love that because the primary calling is universal. Every single person is called into a daily and personal relationship with Jesus Christ every single day. That is very universal to every single person. But there is a secondary calling, and secondary calling is where most people think about their calling maybe as a job, a vocation, or maybe just being a mom. That's something that's very unique and special.
Let's take a break. We will continue our conversation with Paul Sohn. His book is entitled Core to Life Calling. We have a link to his website. We'll have more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, one place where donors often go to check out a charity is GuideStar. Although it has been described as a neutral aggregator of tax data on charities, its latest actions call that designation into question. It originally placed hate group labels on certain groups so designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center at one time was respected for their work, but it has chosen to label many Christian and other conservative groups as hate groups merely because they hold to traditional family values and are critical of the LGBT agenda. Some of the groups include the Family Research Council and the American Family Association, but it also includes such groups as the American College of Pediatricians and the American Freedom Defense Initiative. The leaders of these groups that have been so designated wrote to GuideStar President Jacob Harold to complain about the new policy to label 46 American organizations as hate groups. It is worth mentioning that Jacob Harold is hardly neutral when it comes to evaluating charitable organizations. He has worked as a climate change campaigner for Rainforest Action Network and Greenpeace USA. He has been a host for a NARAL pro-choice event and has blogged for the Huffington Post. The hate group designation not only will affect donations to these organizations, but it could also be dangerous to these organizations. The Southern Poverty Law Center hate group designation for the Family Research Council is the reason Floyd Corkins walked into their lobby intent on killing as many people as he could. A guard took a bullet as he attempted to prevent the possible massacre of the Family Research Council employees. GuideStar announced that it will temporarily remove the hate group designation from these groups. I hope it doesn't return. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continuing your conversation today with Paul Sohn, and again, his book is entitled Quarter Life Calling. Might just mention that we have a link to his website, paulsohn.org, as well as information about the book. It is certainly a book that I would think if you are a millennial or have a ministry with millennials or children that are millennials would certainly want to have. But I think all of us can learn some very important lessons about our work, about our calling, and our stewardship. And Paul, you mentioned this idea of first and second kind of calling, but there's another aspect that you talk about this and what you call whole life stewardship. Could you explain that?
Yes. Whole life stewardship is a critical aspect of understanding what it live a successful life. Because in God's economy, success is spelled for stewardship, and it's stewarding all of life. It's including my spiritual life, my work life, my personal life. Every single thing is a gift that God has given me. And my role is to be a steward, faithfully steward that and maximize that and become the best version that God has called me to become, instead of always constantly comparing yourself to all these different people. And when you become faithfully stewarding all of life, then you free yourself from all the expectations and pressures to become someone else. We truly are free to become who you were created to be.
You know, I've been doing this program for more than 30 years, and I remember when we first started talking about this idea of midlife crisis, a lot of it goes back to some of the work that was done by Daniel Levinson in recognizing that there were certain factors that led to a midlife crisis. But in your book, you have a whole series of factors, at least 5 key factors that might cause an individual to enter into a quarter life crisis. Talk about that, because it used to be that it wasn't until maybe you're in your 30s and 40s and you had some level of failure or a lack of success. But now you're saying that this is a generation that will face a crisis much earlier for some of these factors. Can you go through some of those?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a huge thing with millennials, especially around trying to seek purpose in their life. And if you think about a lot of the reasons why many millennials are going through a quarter life crisis is because of the new technology that we're seeing and the social media. I mean, if you talk about millennials, 70% of millennials have faced some type of a FOMO, fear of missing out, when they're scrolling their phones on Instagram or Facebook. It creates this false kind of reality almost that, you know, everybody's living this highlight reel, and as they look at their own life, it's so different. It feels so ordinary in many ways. And they start to think about, maybe I should quit my job. Maybe I should do what my friends are doing. Maybe I should pursue all these different things and travel the world and experience things. And that has caused to, you know, one of the reasons why there's a quarter life crisis.
Well, and again, part of that is the overload of choices. I've talked about this even in my Sunday school class yesterday, because you have so many choices when you go to a Starbucks, so many choices when you pick a cereal box in the cereal aisle, so many different choices with yogurt and on and on and on, but lots of digital choices. And so the over-choice added to FOMO, the fear of missing out, can cause just a tremendous amount of depression and disconcertion. But then you add another one, which a lot of people haven't thought about, and you call it the YOLO generation, YOLO stands for what? You only live one life. Talk about that, if you want.
Yes, that's a big thing. YOLO, you only live once. And it's this idea that I'm just going to live once so I can do whatever I want. And this really breaks my heart because I often look at my 20-somethings peers, and they often think of this decade as kind of like a etch a sketch. Remember that tool, that game that people would do? And
sure.
They think that they can make any drawing and simply shake to erase when they are done. But the truth is that each drawing leaves a trace that becomes more evident and more permanent over time. So it's this idea that, my 20s is just, a time, time I can waste. I can start everything when I'm 30 or 40. But I think that's a huge mistake because when you think about 20s, it's a really transition. It's a time of transition. It's a turbulent time of going through a lot of changes in life, whether it's thinking about marriage, jobs, and all that. And oftentimes, people who have this YOLO mindset thinks that, okay, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to think about my calling. I can just do whatever my friends are wanting, and there's no consequences because this is the only life that I'm going to live. And it creates a lot of pain in their life afterwards, which many of them are aware of.
What about this issue of busyness and workaholism? Even in your book, you talk about one of the Gallup polls that say that 44% of Americans call themselves workaholics. And when you recognize there are a lot of people that are workaholics that would never identify themselves as that, this may be an epidemic proportion. And with that level of busyness, it's really difficult to cultivate the spiritual life, isn't it?
Oh, it's very difficult. I think that a lot of people, especially millennials, they say 70% of millennials find their identity in work. So work has been a central part of defining themselves. And as more and more millennials are moving to the major cosmopolitan cities, they're definitely working a lot more. At the same time, they want to have some flexibility and balance, and work and life becomes all integrated into one. But again, it's very difficult in terms of thinking about, what is life outside the parameters of work? How do I steward that? So the whole life stewardship, again, applies here because it's a critical part of understanding how do I be a faithful steward of everything that God has called me to do, not just my work.
One more,
that's a huge part.
Yeah, I want to take one more just before I get to a break, and that is the idea of the obsessive comparison disorder. That's a new one for our listeners, but again, it's something that individuals have begun to identify as well. How does that lead to this idea of kind of an identity crisis?
Well, I think it's an epidemic of worldwide proportions, especially with so much of the world has been flat, and the transparency and the exposure we have to so many different things with our friends, of our peers, all the people on social media. You constantly compare yourself. And as you compare yourself, you're going to feel more bad about yourself. You think about the number one emotion that people experience the most on social media, and that's jealousy. And comparison, again, really is one of those poisons that kind of help you not think about your calling, but think about all the things that maybe all the other people are called to do. And it really detracts you from really following your calling.
So as we come back from the break, let's, if we can, talk about some of these issues. One of them, of course, is calling. Another one is the sweet spot, and even this issue of work. But wouldn't you agree that these are areas where we really need to emphasize this inside the church so that people will really understand that there is a kind of a different world out there, and if they don't really kind of understand who they are and how to use their gifts, they're just going to be swept along by sort of this cultural tide, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. And I think churches can do a lot with that, talking about faith and work, talking about helping and equipping their church members to discover their vocational sweet spot. Those are some really powerful tools that churches can employ to engage them, because so many millennials are actually leaving churches, and that's a really great way to have those conversations with them.
So again, let's, if we can, take a break. And when we come back, I'm going to give you a chance to join the conversation as well. We have a lot more to cover. The whole idea of calling, this idea of a sweet spot, and how we can really begin to think biblically about our work. But if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to know a little bit more about Paul Sohn, you can go to his website, paulsohn.org. We have a link on the website. This book is one I would certainly commend to you if you're wanting to have a ministry with millennials. If you are a millennial, I think this 170 pages will be very worthwhile your read. And also, again, it applies to individuals even outside of that particular age group. But it really is beginning to surface now. And one of the things we've tried to do here on Point of View so often is identify some of these trends as they're breaking so that we can see the opportunity for ministry. And as Paul mentioned just a minute ago, if you really want to prevent millennials from leaving the church, or you want to attract millennials to your church, knowing some things about this are going to be absolutely key. So again, we have lots of information on our website today about this particular book. Let me also mention that my commentary today is about GuideStar and how they had listed a number of ministries, including individuals we've interviewed on this program before, as hate groups. They've withdrawn that. But again, if you want to know more about that issue, it's on our Viewpoints commentary. We have a video about the Korean lights, because we've been talking a lot about South Korea lately. We have some take action items, and most importantly, we encourage you to click that button to join the Truth Team. Join with us financially so we can bring these kinds of programs to you every single day. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Paul Sohn right after this.
There are those who listen to Point of View while they're driving, and some can listen at home or at work. But here's the question. Where do you go where you cannot listen to Point of View? Well, if you have the app, the free Point of View radio app, the answer is just about nowhere. This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kirby's Viewpoints commentary. Click the Take Action link. Learn about important issues and make a difference in this world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, easily contact us with your comments or questions. Don't leave home or the office or anywhere else without Point of View. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the free Point of View radio app. Oh, and one more thing, if you like it, click that little button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app with you on the go.
Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kirby Anderson.
I'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Paul Sohn with us as we talk about his book, Quarter Life Calling. Let's go to California first. Dave, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hi, thanks, Kirby. I got a question for Paul. I'm 25, and I'm very active in my church, and I've learned throughout my life that my identity is in Christ, not my work or my hobbies or social media. Now, we've heard a lot about those things already. How can I encourage my fellow millennials when it comes to this identity crisis that we're talking about?
Paul?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think that this is a lifelong process of really rooting yourself, grounding your identity in Christ, right? Because there's a lot of idols that people have. And that's some of the things that I've been able to discover. Some people, that could be work. Some people, that could be leisure. Some people, that could be possessions or power or prestige. And I think having these conversations about surrendering your life to Christ, I think is first and foremost a critical part of that. And as you think about, what the Bible teaches, there's so many verses that the Bible teaches about who we are in Christ. Having those conversations and talking about, what does this look like in your life, right? So Ephesians 2:10 is like one of my favorite verses. You are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance. God calls us a masterpiece, a workmanship. But so many of us, we struggle to see ourselves as a masterpiece, right? And I think that's a great point of discussion to talk about a lot of maybe the past wounds or hurts or struggles that people have gone through and helping them, whether it might be leading them to a counselor or a coach. But I think having those conversations on a regular basis will help them to know that, first of all, they're living under a false identity, and they need to replace that by God's identity.
One of the other thoughts I had, and Dave, maybe you can respond to this as well, is, Paul, each chapter ends with 3 or 4 discussion questions. Whether you do this in a small group setting, which would be ideal, or even in a conversation at a Starbucks, it seems to me that some of those questions begin to open up some of those areas of discussion, don't you think?
Absolutely. I purposely included specific activities, exercises, questions at the end of each chapter, because I really want this to be not just an isolated kind of a thing where you just check off the box and say, suddenly I just realized my identity. But this is a conversation that you need to have with like-minded people in your community, and that's going to really also uncover a lot of things that you maybe have not thought about yourself.
Dave?
Absolutely. That's awesome. That's great to know. Thank you.
Well, thank you for calling. And again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some more calls a little bit later. Let me, for just a minute, Paul, talk about your website. We have a link to paulsohn.org. There's a section there on coaching, speaking, and consulting. So as people go to our website, pointofview.net, or go directly to your website and find it either way, talk about some of the resources that would be available for people like Dave or other listeners or pastors who might want to know a little bit more.
Absolutely. So there's not only coaching or consulting services that we provide, but I actually started an entire company where we dedicate specifically 20-somethings and millennials to truly live out their identity and calling. And that website is Cara. It's called Cara, Qara.org. And if you go there, you'll have a number of free resources on presentations on millennials, different blog posts, which we publish on a regular basis that will help people like Dave, anyone who really wants to ground themselves in Christ. And there's specific biblical advice coming from a variety of number of experts and thought leaders, whether it's personal finance, whether it's leadership, whether it's dating and marriage, things that a lot of millennials talk about, but being able to share that in a very practical but also biblical way.
Again, Quara, Q-A-R-A. It's an organization that really empowers 20-somethings to discover their God-given identity. And again, the book, which is entitled Quarter Life Calling, is one that you can find in your local bookstore, but we have a link there so that you can find it as well. We've talked about this idea of identity. I think people maybe understand a little bit about how they want to have their identity in Christ, but that relates to a whole section in your book about what is your calling and how to discover your calling. This is not a kind of a one-step or two-step process. It's really kind of a lifelong process, because some of us, if I can be the old guy around the table, discover some aspects of our calling even later in life.
It's a huge part. I think, Kirby, like you said, it's about discovering your calling, because it's not like a formula. It's actually a messy process. It really is about discovering some of the ways in which God has called me, using what I call a vocational sweet spot. And those are your personality, your passions, the gifts that God's given you, and life experience. So if you imagine kind of a 4 circles and a Venn diagram, and overlapping that is really your vocational sweet spot. And as you discover what your vocational sweet spot is throughout your entire life, that's going to be a place where you're going to be truly fulfilled and truly feel like this is where I can have an impact. This is what exactly God has called me to do, because you're going to feel so alive. This is a place where you're going to feel so alive, where you can impact so many people through the giftings and the calling God has given you.
And again, when we talk about the sweet spot, that's really helpful. First of all, of course, you played tennis. I've played tennis as well. When you know whether it's golf or tennis, whatever, you hit the sweet spot. But it also prevents you from making a mistake. And I remember Mike Rowe, many of our listeners are familiar with Dirty Jobs. He said more than once, when people say, pursue your passion, he's going, no, don't. I mean, your passion is one of those circles in that Venn diagram, but your personality and your passion, your giftedness, and your life experience are your sweet spot. But yeah, some people have a passion, but they don't have any ability in it. And so I appreciate the fact that Mike Rowe over the years has said, you know, when you hear people say, pursue your passion, well, that's not really what you need to do if you really want to discover your calling, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to have those other elements, because oftentimes, you know, we live in a world like very intoxicated with passion. And if you think about where millennials are really flocking into the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, you go there, every single person is like, hey, what do you do? What are you passionate about? Like, what's your passion? And I think it's kind of abused pretty much, because the word passion, you could be passionate about a lot of different things. I mean, I could be passionate about tennis, but for many reasons, you know, I know that I'm not going to be a professional tennis player.
Yes.
I'm very passionate about it for sure. I'm also passionate about, you know, reading. I'm passionate about a lot of different things. But being able to understand that passions that serve yourself is really self-centered, but passions that are directed more outer focus around serving people, serving the world, serving kind of maybe a broken aspect of this world that you see that breaks your heart, and you feel like you want to provide a need for that. You want to help them. And that's where the outer directed passion is going to really be able to align with many of the other things. And that's where you have to look at your gifts. You also have to look at your life story. You have to look at your entire personality. And that's going to be a puzzle. Like, it's going to take time. It's going to take conversations. It's going to take different assessments to better understand yourself.
Well, and back to the issue of gifts for just a minute. You know, obviously we need to steward our talents. We need to maybe go through some kind of spiritual gift assessment, and there are lots of those available online. But I appreciate the fact that in your book you also say you need to evaluate your weaknesses, because sometimes in this kind of millennial, everybody deserves a trophy and I'm always good at what I can do. Sometimes a wise and discerning Christian will understand his or her weaknesses and understand those as important, and can be in some cases more important than even some of your gifts and your strengths. True?
Oh, very true. I think, you know, you have to be realistic. You got to think about, okay, what is the areas that I'm good at? But what are some of my weaknesses? And if that's a part of your weakness, instead of trying to continually work on your weakness, maybe you have to mitigate it. Maybe you have to delegate it and empower other people in your team who have strengths that are maybe some of your weaknesses. And for me, I've always resonated with something that my friend told me, and he said that, Paul, God doesn't call the qualified, but God qualifies the called. Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with me so many ways, because honestly, a lot of things that I do, whether it's speaking and writing, it's not necessarily my strength in some ways. I have to actually depend on God every single day, because I realize how I need God, because it doesn't come sometimes very naturally. I've worked on it very hard. I've tried to put in those 10,000 hours to be able to get to where I am. But I also know that I can't rely on talent alone. And that's a huge part that I feel like many people need to understand, is that, yes, ability is important, but availability is a lot more important.
Well said. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about work. Is that just something we do to make a job and earn a living, or is there some kind of theological purpose to work, and how to think about that? And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll continue our conversation with Paul Sohn right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Supreme Court has announced that it will hear the appeal of Masterpiece Cake Shop. You are probably familiar with at least the broad outline of the facts. A baker is approached to create a product that communicates a message he has a moral objection to creating. It is, unfortunately, an all too familiar refrain these days. Its threat to religious freedom and the freedom of speech should be obvious. Our Constitution guarantees the rights of free exercise of religion and free speech for every American. By granting review of Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, the Supreme Court of the United States has indicated that it wants to consider whether the people of faith who operate a business will be welcome to the public square or driven from it. Americans want a diverse public square that tolerates a variety of beliefs and opinions. We hope the Supreme Court will use this opportunity to protect people like First Liberty clients Aaron and Melissa Klein, who have been forced out of business, penalized $135,000, and even had a gag order issued against them, all because the state of Oregon would not tolerate them operating their business according to their religious conscience. No one should lose their livelihood because the government disagrees with their religious beliefs. Let's hope the Supreme Court makes that abundantly clear. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. You can protect your religious freedom by going to firstliberty.org to download your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit. Our attorneys created kits for churches, ministries, Christian schools, military members, students, and teachers, and the workplace. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Paul Sohn with us for a few more minutes as we talk about his book, Quarter Life Calling. Before I get to another phone call, let's, if we can, real quickly talk about work. Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work at it wholeheartedly, as though you were doing it for the Lord and not merely for people. There seems to be a really important element in your book that if we're going to address our calling and talk about our work and our calling and our vocation, we really need to redeem our view of work. We need to develop a Christian theology of work. So how do we do so?
It's, I think, a huge part of understanding your calling, Kirby, I think, because oftentimes we see work, either there's two views of work. One is that work is a necessary evil. So this really creates an attitude where there's this huge temptation just to coast. And work week is just simply a means to an end. People work for the weekend, they relax, they might just go binge on Netflix or vacation. The other camp is where our paid work is the ultimate measure of our self. Our position, our earning potential becomes a mark by which to measure our own worth. And we talked about this earlier, where our work becomes an idol in many ways. And I think that there's a third alternative where our work is something that God has redeemed. And if you think about the entire story of Genesis, we know that work itself is, God is a worker. He introduces himself as a creator. He worked. And that is not a curse in a way, but also it's something that we have to understand, that we have to steward everything God has given us to be able to use that and work effectively. And there's a few things that I feel like people can practically do in order to redeem work. And one of that is to do excellent work. And I think it's common sense to say that, but oftentimes when you put Christian, the word Christian before anything, whether it's Christian movie or Christian art or Christian band, there's a connotation that the work is actually subpar. And I think it's kind of turned into almost like a joke. And I really believe we're losing souls, not really because of our Christian principles and beliefs, but maybe because of the negative perception that Christian work is inferior compared to the secular or mainstream work in many ways. So whatever you do, being able to work at it with excellence, working for the Lord, doing things with excellence will actually give you more opportunities to be a faithful witness in the workplace.
You talk about being a fan of the comic strip Dilbert, and of course we've posted many of those over the years and different reasons, but there is kind of a cynicism that runs through that, kind of a work is a curse, work is, you're just working with dumb people, that there are just all sorts of bureaucratic rules and the rest. So how do we think that through? As a person that's probably read as many Dilbert cartoons as anybody on the listening audience today, are there any principles we can apply about how to do excellence and maybe overcome some of the drudgery and boredom and even frustration of our work way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you talked about Dilbert, and that's really the kind of the and maybe the feel out there that, you just go to work and it's a 9 to 5, the daily grind, it's a rat race. But I think a big part of understanding that and knowing that is everything that God has given you is not a coincidence. In fact, I call it a God incidence, that everything that you're doing is part of what God has called you. It may not be your vocational sweet spot, right? But a lot of times millennials, they go into a job as if that, they think they're going to work there and, climb the corporate ladder. But the studies show that on average, 20-something will have 7 different jobs just in their 20s. So the fact that you're going to be moving to different jobs, different opportunities, and throughout that process, I really believe that's important to go back and go through the Venn diagram of the vocational sweet spot and think about, what did I learn about this job? What am I learning about myself? What are my different strengths and gifts and passions? And being able to then think through and proactively think about, okay, in the next maybe couple years, what does my job want to look like that's aligned with my vocational sweet spot? So it takes a lot of evaluation and the feedback from other people that I believe that's going to help you to really discover what that looks like.
Just before we let you go, let's talk about some of the resources that are available again. Quara, Q-A-R-A. We, of course, have a link to paulsohn.org and some great opportunities for you to find some of these resources. But as I mentioned just a minute ago, you have a number of chapters in this book that actually give you a chance in these 15 chapters to kind of think about these issues. You have some exercises. You have questions for reflection and discussion. So if maybe this fall a person might want to do a Sunday school class or a Bible fellowship or a small group on this, or maybe a pastor would like to preach through some of this, what is available so that they could actually use this in an effective way within a church or other kind of small group context?
Yes. So first of all, I definitely recommend that you go through a lot of the exercises and activity yourself to be able to know how it goes. There's specific questions that you can lead in a small group setting, but also people who want to go to the next level. If you go to the Kara page, there are a variety of different resources available, whether if you really want to go through a workshop or whether you want to go through a retreat. We have different people in our team, and even myself, that I would love to talk with you about ways to partner together, because there's a lot of things that are also included in the book, but also there's stuff that I couldn't include in the book.
Sure.
But we're creating online courses, we're creating different type of content to really equip not only millennials as well, but leaders of millennials and pastors and young adult leaders who really want to know how to engage their young millennials in the church.
Let's take another phone call. We'll go to Texas this time. Laura, you're on with Paul Sohn.
Hi, good morning, or should I say afternoon. My question was just finding identity in Christ. I'm 44 years old, and I'm just barely realizing that was an issue, and there was an incident where I was at a Bible study in 2 different incidents, and when everyone went up to get prayed over, or everyone was speaking into everyone's life and stuff, one of the main ladies that was there, the prayer warrior lady, she was like, no, I don't have anything for her. No, I don't want to pray for her. And, so it bring out something in me, from my past being, just the abuse and the life that I've lived, it bring out something in me, and I felt abandoned. It made me feel weird and like left out and stuff. But that's because I don't know that who I am in Christ.
You are in Christ, for sure. Again, those get back to some of the things you talk about in your book in terms of life experiences. We've got less than a minute, but any quick comments you might make?
Yes. I highly encourage go through the life mapping process. Life mapping process is going to give you clarity around some of the defining moments that happen in your life. And as you think about what are some of the triggers, some of the things that happen in your life, that one-page visual that will help you understand some of the different messages that you've been brought under. And then now the key is, how do you replace those messages with God's messages, what God talks about? So going through that process, I think, will be very helpful.
Again, you can probably find the book in your local bookstore. It's with Faith Words, but again, we have links on the website, information about Paul Sohn. And Paul, thank you for taking the time today to not only write the book, but for joining us today here on the Point of View program. And let's do it again sometime.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to spend some time in studio with Mike Broyles and Gene Getz and Bob Kulick, and I think you're going to really enjoy that conversation. And we've had some opportunities to hear from them before, but again, I look forward to that opportunity. Visit our website, pointofview.net. You can find out more about the conversations we're having today. We'll take a break and be back right after this.
Point of View is committed to spreading the truth, oftentimes a truth that those in political power don't like getting heard. But the only way it can be heard is if our team stands strong together, if you do what you can to support the Point of View Truth Team. It's having an impact, as we heard recently from U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert.
Everywhere I go, I hear people that you have influenced, that Point of View has affected. You have made such a difference, and you rely on people to contribute, and if they don't contribute, then that truth does not get heard.
Help Point of View make a difference. Pray and consider what level is right for you. $30, $65, $100 a month, or even more. Please do what you can. 1-800-347-5151, or visit online, pointov.org. pointofview.net. Look near the top right for the link that says Become a Monthly Partner. Join the Truth Team, 800-347-5151, and pointofview.net.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
He's the point guy.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Second hour today. Thank you for joining us. And again, if you did not join us in the first hour, I might just mention last week I was up speaking at Word of Life, and my voice is a little bit hoarse, but we'll make our way through it. One of our guests here has been at Word of Life for years, so we'll get to that in just a minute. But I heard the other day that Mike Broyles is going to be in town, and we've had him on the program as well, so we've decided to bring him around the round table along with Gene Getz and Bob Kulick. But first of all, let's, if we can, Mike, introduce you properly. We have your bio here. We have information about Malachi Dads. We'll talk a little bit about Hannah's Gift. But in case people are meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit more about your ministry.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for letting me join you and letting us join you, Kirby. It's an honor to be on Point of View. Well, our ministry is really about inmates coming to faith in Christ and then beginning to disciple and grow in their faith. But the key component of ours is the family element, assisting that inmate to share the gospel with their child and bring them to faith and bring healing and hope to that child, that inmate child, so that reconciliation, forgiveness, and hope can come to a family and break the cycle of crime from one generation to the next.
One of the other individuals in studio with me is Gene Getz. You have been in every one of the Point of View studios since we began more than 40 years ago. So you've seen, what do you think of this new studio? It looks pretty good.
I think it's wonderful. What is it, 24 hours old?
Not much more, but again, individual that is the president of Center for Church Renewal, also the author of this book, the Bible, I should say, the Life Essentials Bible, as well as, of course, we always talk about Measure of a Man. But, Gene, it's always just great to have you in studio. But talk about your connection with all this, because when people think of you, they think of you as a Bible teacher, but also there's an obvious connection to the prison ministry.
Well, there is, and you mentioned Measure of a Man, and then you mentioned the Bible. The two are in conjunction, because Mike and one of his associates called me, I don't know how long ago that was, several years ago, and said, Gene, would you take the Measure of a Man and actually develop it into two books called The Heart of a Man,
right.
Part 1, Part 2, to use it in the Malachi Dads program. And you were just beginning to really introduce that program, I believe, at Angola.
Yes.
And I got really excited about it, and we did the two books, and that became a half year of the curriculum for Malachi Dads. And there are a couple of other books, so it's a year's curriculum. But once they go through that, then the next step was to invite me to come in to those graduation programs, particularly at Angola, beginning at Angola. It's expanded now, to present the Life Essential Study Bible as a gift to each one of the men that has completed the program. So the first time I was invited to go into that graduation, Bob, how many graduates were there? About
125.
125. Bob's on my board, Center for Church Renewal. And, of course, now he's on Mike's board as well, so he does a dual role. But I couldn't go because I was speaking at Moody graduation.
Yes.
Well, I said, Bob, can you go? So Bob was the first one to go into Angola and present those gifts to about 120 men that graduated. And from that point, Bob, I think we've been back about 4 or 5 times and have presented probably just in Angola about 500 of the Life Essential Study Bibles to these men.
Let me come to Bob, since we've already mentioned his name a couple of times. Bob's been on the program as well. We've interviewed him, and I always love to tell your story. Here's an individual that I think illustrates some of the things we talked about in the first hour. You had this level of financial success, but then you were looking for significance, and yet you could have done a lot of different things, but even so, you said, I want to have a ministry in the prisons. Tell a little bit more about that story.
I didn't know exactly where I was being led, but I was being led somewhere. And it ended up to be the prison ministries. I had a friend who ended up getting incarcerated and started talking to him while he was behind bars, and I sent him one of the Life Essential Study Bibles. He said there were so many guys there that saw it and liked it, they were saving up their money for it, and I told them, don't save the money, let me send it to them. So I sent about a dozen or so Bibles. They created a group called the Band of Brothers that would do Bible studies together, and from that, it just exploded into all these other things. Gene asked me to join his board, and it was funny because at the time I said, why do you want me? And he says, I just think you can help us out on the board. And it was the first board meeting I was at that he announced that he was connected. Just made the connection to have the Measure of the Man rewritten specifically for prisoners. And so all these things just have led me into prison ministry, and once it gets into your blood, you can't get it out.
Well, it sounds like providence
amazing
to me, dude.
It is.
Just the way that all came together. Mike, let me come back to you for just a minute. We're talking about Angola prison. Talk about what that means, because it seems to me that some people say there's just nothing we can do. We have this high recidivism rate, it's just like a revolving door. There's nothing we can do to really deal with the prison population. But you have a very different perspective about that, don't you?
Yes, sir. Particularly at Angola State Prison in Louisiana, because the average sentence there is 93 years.
Wow.
That's the average sentence. So most of the men there are going to die and pass away. And so sometimes people say to me, well, Mike, these guys, it's jailhouse religion, and they're just waiting to get out and get some spiritual things, to maybe get some perks of being in jail and going to chapel or whatever. But in Angola, there's not that excuse.
Yeah.
And so those men are in there for forever. And so there's been incredible transformation there through the power of the gospel. So 20-some years ago, there was a warden named Burl Cain. And Mr. Cain is a Christ follower, and Mr. Cain began to bring faith-based organizations into Angola State Prison. We were one of them invited. That is the Awana Lifeline about 12 years ago.
Right.
And so we help these men reconnect to their children and bring restoration, break the cycle of crime. So that was established about 12 years ago for us. But if you look at all of Angola State Prison and a seminary, a fully accredited seminary, and many other beautiful ministries, Christ-honoring ministries, we see that today there's about 6,300 inmates in Angola State Prison. Today there's 28 local churches in Angola State Prison,
wow,
all pastored by life for inmates who have a 4-year Bible degree.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what's in Malachi Dads and also what's available through Hannah's Gift. I want to spend some time talking about the Life Essentials Bible, because that is such a great resource, which has, of course, been given out to the prisoners. But whether you're in prison or not, somebody in prison or not, you're going to benefit from this one, which allows you to apply these biblical principles. And of course, if you'd like to join our conversation today, we a little bit later would love to hear if your church has a ministry to those in prison, or maybe you know of individuals that would benefit from some of this. This is why we're doing this today. I hope that it will be a source of encouragement, and also encourage you that whether you're in prison or not, you can learn some very important lessons about being a godly man, about a godly wife, a godly mother, husband, as well as certainly how to apply God's word to these very important issues. So let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
Kirby.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, one place where donors often go to check out a charity is GuideStar. Although it has been described as a neutral aggregator of tax data on charities, its latest actions call that designation into question. It originally placed hate group labels on certain groups so designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center at one time was respected for their work, but it has chosen to label many Christian and other conservative groups as hate groups merely because they hold to traditional family values and are critical of the LGBT agenda. Some of the groups include the Family Research Council and the American Family Association, but it also includes such groups as the American College of Pediatricians and the American Freedom Defense Initiative. The leaders of these groups that have been so designated wrote to GuideStar President Jacob Harold to complain about the new policy to label 46 American organizations as hate groups. It is worth mentioning that Jacob Harold is hardly neutral when it comes to evaluating charitable organizations. He has worked as a climate change campaigner for Rainforest Action Network and Greenpeace USA. He has been a host for a NARAL pro-choice event and has blogged for the Huffington Post. The hate group designation not only will affect donations to these organizations, but it could also be dangerous to these organizations. The Southern Poverty Law Center hate group designation for the Family Research Council is the reason Floyd Corkins walked into their lobby intent on killing as many people as he could. A guard took a bullet as he attempted to prevent the possible massacre of the Family Research Council employees. GuideStar announced that it will temporarily remove the hate group designation from these groups. I hope it doesn't return. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking about prison ministry, but as you can tell, much more as well. Mike Broyles with us, Gene Getz, as well as Bob Kulick. And Mike, let me come back to this idea of Malachi Dads. We've held up the book. We have links to it on the website. And, of course, in just a minute, we'll talk about Hannah's gift. But whether you're in prison or not, these are just excellent opportunities to take the measure of a man and to go through these in a systematic way and really begin to apply biblical principles to what it means to be a godly man. True?
Malachi Dads is based on Malachi 4:6, where it says this, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers. And so it's about reconciliation and hope. So the curriculum, Malachi Dads, is really about 2 or 3 major themes throughout all 4 of the 12-week books that we have. Kirby has one of the books in his hand right now, Malachi Dad's Heart of the Father. The emphasis there is, first of all, being a godly man. You can't be a godly father till you're a godly man. So the first 5 chapters of Malachi Dads is about creation, sin, salvation, sanctification, and the local church. Then we get into the fathering aspect. So each of the books are 12 weeks. They're interactive Bible studies, and the men and women for Hannah's gift, you get to interact with the Bible. They memorize Scripture. Remember, we're Awana Lifeline.
That's right.
And
Awana.
So there's a Malachi Dad pledge there, and those kind of things. And so as the men and women complete their books, they get a certificate of completion. We celebrate because for many of them, this is the first really educational biblical study they've completed and that kind of thing. One of the most exciting things that's happening in the Malachi Dad movement, I think, today, because we're in 30 states around the country, 7 countries around the world, but one of the most exciting things out of Angola State Prison is we have returning citizens. That is, men who are getting out now. And the laws are changing in Louisiana. The laws are tougher there, so men and women would never get out. But now that's beginning to soften. So we have 3 Malachi Dads that have returned back home into the community and the local church, and most of all to their families in the last year as they've been released to go home. They're serving Christ. They're being a father now for the first time, firsthand, and we thank God for Malachi Dads and that tool.
You know, one of the things, Kirby, that's exciting about the books is that when they invited me to do the 2 books based on the measure of a man, they gave me a format in terms of the way to structure it. Right. And you'll notice at the end, there's a facilitator's manual that's built right in.
That's right.
And shows them exactly how to use it. And of course, then also we work in the interactive part throughout the book. So it was an exciting project for me to take a new approach, take this biblical content and put it all together into those 2 books, Heart of a Man.
And again, questions, answers, Bible verses to memorize and all the rest. So that's Malachi Dads. I thought for just a minute we'd talk about Hannah's gift. You know, you have the Heart of a Mother, family restoration. And Bob, that's something you've been giving away recently at another prison. Talk about that if you might.
Just recently went up to Pueblo, Colorado. Gave away Bibles to 13 graduates of the Hannah's Gift program. Alicia Reeves was a lady who came down to Angola, I think it was 3 years ago, and saw what was going on there. And she, like so many people involved with the prison ministry, had never been involved with prison ministry before, but she really got it on her heart to take it back to Colorado, her home in Colorado. She lives in Colorado Springs, and she said, I had no connections with the prisons. I had no people who I knew would come down and do this. And she said, I just started praying about it, talked about it in my church. She ended up getting, I think it was like 7 or 8 volunteers that would go down once a week down to the prison in Pueblo. And she said, doors opened at the prison, and she ended up starting the Hannah's Gift program down there. And the women actually just took to it right away. They just loved it. I went in there at the time of the graduation to give them the Bibles. I didn't realize at the time that they had not been told they were receiving these Bibles as gifts.
Wow.
And part of giving it to the inmates, we want to spend about 45 minutes to an hour explaining to them how this Bible is used, because it's such a unique Bible. So I had a chance to meet with them in a separate room aside from the graduation, about an hour before the graduation, and I started passing out the Bibles to them. And these women, the first woman grabbed it, and she actually started caressing it. And tears started running down her face. I gave it to another girl. She looked at it. She started crying. And the whole room was breaking. And they just said, I never realized I'd be getting something like this. And then explaining the Bible to them and how it works. The first lady that started crying told me afterwards, when she first got incarcerated, she got a Bible from her father. It was her grandmother's Bible. And she said, that was a Bible that I was going to pass down to my kids. She said, a Satanist in the prison defamed it, destroyed it, and she said, now I have this Bible to pass down to my kids. She goes, this is the one I'm going to pass down to my kids. So being touched, things like that, and just the stories one after another of the reconciliation that they've had with their kids, with their parents because of these programs, just amazing.
And the other exciting thing is that Alicia is saying that now in Bible studies, they're using the Life Essentials Study Bible, doing the preparation. So it's taking them deeper, into the Scriptures. So that's the exciting thing, because they're learning the design of the Bible, how it's put together, how the principles emerge from the text, the application of it. So
the week after graduation, on the normal night that they would have Hannah's Gift programs, they had a Bible study program, and they started doing that together as a group.
Gene, let's talk about the Bible for just a minute. And first of all, I want people to realize this is one place where you can help yourself and help someone else. Because if they go to biblicalprinciples.org, Bible Principles, excuse me, right. They can actually not only purchase a Bible, but when they purchase a Bible, then one is given away, right?
That's right, yes. For every Bible we actually sell through our ministry, we give one away. All the proceeds go right back into our ministry. And one of our major ways in which we give Bibles, not only to pastors, third world country pastors who've never had training, but this prison ministry. And so if someone wants a Bible they can get into, and I of course, I'm a little prejudiced, but I feel like it's a good Bible and unique because it's the first multimedia study Bible, right. Which, by the way, they can't use the multimedia part in prison, but we're working on that. And we're hoping to be able to do that. But with the 1,500 videos that go with the 1,500 principles, they can download the Life Essentials QR code reader. It's free. And they can get all 1,500 principles. But if they would like to invest in a prisoner, if they will simply go to BiblePrinciples.org, and they could also go to 1-800-RENEWAL if they want to. But if they order a Bible, we will be able to give one away to prisoners in Angola, other places like we've been talking about. But it just hit me that we can also, if they order one, we can emboss their name in gold on the front of the Bible. And I thought, what we could do, could we do this, Kirby? Say, if they simply tell they heard us on Point of View, for free, we'll emboss their name in gold, and we'll pay the shipping.
That is incredible.
And again, they buy one, they give one away free.
Yeah, BiblePrinciples.org. But again, these use QR codes, and people are familiar with those little boxes that have all sorts of little buttons there, and that allows individuals, maybe not in the prisons, but yeah, I've seen these in third world countries now, Gene, where they do this. They may not have a home phone, but they've got a cell phone, and they can do a QR code, and then they put on that, and all of a sudden there's Gene Getz in Africa or Asia or someplace like that, teaching on one of those 1,500 principles. So it's a multimedia Bible, like something I've never seen before.
Yeah, and it's exciting how God's using it. We're hearing from people all over the world. And of course, English is such a dominant language around the world. So I'm just thankful for the way God is using it. But coming back to the prison ministry, this is a door that God is opening. And so, again, I'd just like to underscore, not only I think they would be blessed by the Bible, our listeners, but if they get one, they give one away.
Again, BiblePrinciples.org. Again, we have some of the links to that on the website. We have links to Awana. We'll come back, and Mike, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of those resources, because there may be some people saying, we got a prison right down the block here. I would love to develop a ministry. I have no idea how to get started. I have no idea how to really educate individuals. Or I've been in prison ministry for a while, but I'd like to give them something that's maybe not a seminary education, but something that would be kind of a Bible teaching principle, so that we're doing more than just kind of giving them basics. So we'll come back and spend some time talking about some of the resources available at Awana, Malachi Dads, Hannah's Gift. But most importantly, if you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. All of it available at our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
There are those who listen to Point of View while they're driving, and some can listen at home or at work. But here's the question: where do you go where you cannot listen to Point of View? Well, if you have the app, the free Point of View radio app, the answer is just about nowhere. This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kirby's Viewpoints commentary, Click the Take Action link. Learn about important issues and make a difference in this world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, easily contact us with your comments or questions. Don't leave home or the office or anywhere else without Point of View. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the free Point of View radio app. Oh, and one more thing, if you like it, click that little button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kirby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. I'd like to know what you're doing in terms of prison ministry, or perhaps you have some questions about starting one, or maybe revamping what you already have. That is certainly relevant. 1-800-351-1212. Let me come back to Mike for just a minute, and that is we have a link to Awana. And Mike, a lot of people might say, well, we've had a prison ministry where maybe we go in and preach, but this is really more mentoring and discipleship. And so as people go to the website that we have here, awanalifeline.org, there are all sorts of resources there. There are things about Malachi Dads, Hannah's Gift, Returning Hearts, featured stories. Talk about some of the resources that people might be able to use.
Yeah, Kirby, we're excited that we can provide the resources like in Malachi Dad. We have 4 distinct 12-week materials that are interactive. They're Christ-honoring. There's evangelism as a part of each of these books, and in discipling that man in Malachi Dads. And so some of these materials are also in Spanish for our Spanish listeners.
Very good.
Who might participate that way. And so church leaders, those who in prison ministries, it's a systematic study of God's Word to produce godly men or godly women, and to be a healthy, godly father or mother, even while you're on the inside. And so if you go to awanalifeline.org, those materials are there. You can order them at any time through our materials. Returning Hearts Celebration is a one-day event that we do about 10 times around the country and in Dominican Republic. And we bring the inmate children in to the prison with their father or mother. And they eat a lot of food.
Mm-hmm.
And they play a lot of games. But most of all, we teach the fathers and mothers to begin to reconcile and to pray and to talk to their child about spiritual and godly things. And so that's a beautiful resource that our listeners, Kirby, could participate all over the country in various parts. We have one in Florida or California or Illinois. We've had it. So there's several of these all over the country that you could jump in and join with us. So we'd love to have you look at our website, awanalifeline.org, for the resources to assist you as a church leader, because Malachi Dads and Hannah's Gift has been used in local churches. It's not just for the inmate person, but they've used for people that have maybe difficult, challenging backgrounds that a local church could have.
Yes.
But Kirby, I want to tell one story.
Please do.
I can't wait to tell this story. and our listeners, this is I like to say to kids, this is not a fictional story. This is a real life story. This story is about a lady in Ohio named Leah. 2.5 years ago, Leah was incarcerated for about four years. She got out. She's on probation. I met her at a local church in Cedarville, Ohio, Grace Baptist Church in Cedarville, and she'd been out about 6 months to 9 months. She told me her story of God's grace. She had a lady in that local church who went to her every week. She didn't know her well, but every week she would drive 30 minutes and pray and read the scriptures with Leah, who needed encouragement. Leah was a believer, but she needed encouragement. Leah went back inside as she was inside that prison and began to lead other women to Christ. Even the wardens would trust her with counseling of other women, which is very unusual. Well, today, Leah's been out now for a little over 2 years. And we've been working behind the scenes with Leah and with the warden where she was incarcerated. Last Saturday morning, she took 15 people from her local church, and Leah was the leader of Hannah's Gift. They had 30 women from that Dixon prison in Dayton, Ohio, and they have birthed, through the grace of God, Leah leading this team. And I thank God for people like Leah who are willing to take steps of faith, and then a local church who supports her, and then supplied the volunteers and others who have given so we can provide these resources as gifts to the inmates.
You know, we have, for example, listeners in Ohio. If they wanted to partner with this or other places around the country where you have that, are there ways you can link them up to already existing ministries?
Yes, and that's what we do a lot of. We work with local churches and nonprofit organizations that maybe have prison ministries. We provide the training to equip the volunteers to go in, and then we empower them through the materials and tools we have. So feel free to use awanalifeline.org, write us a note, or you can write me personally, Mike B. at awana.org. Mike B. at awana.org.
You know, one of the other questions some people might have is, we'd like to start a new work, but we know that the warden there might be real skeptical. But I know, for example, the foreword in one of these books here is from Warden Burl Cain. So it seems to me that you can use some of the resources or some of the experiences from other prisons to maybe even open up a new prison. Isn't that a possibility?
Yeah, very much. And because wardens trust other wardens. And thus, if we have a success story in one part of the community or one part of your state, we can pass that story on to the warden maybe that's near your home, near your church. And you just contact us, and we will assist you in that process. So we just need a faith-oriented, risk-oriented listener in your community, and we will help you through the process of starting a new Hannah's Gift or a new Malachi Dads in your community.
Bob, let me come to you, because some people might think, well, I don't have a degree in criminology. I don't know anything about prisons, but you didn't either. And look at what God has done through you. So talk about that for just a minute. There may be listeners out there that are saying, you know, maybe God would like me to do this, but I don't really feel like I'm qualified. Probably you had that same feeling at first.
It's funny. Almost everyone I speak to about prison ministry, who is in prison ministry now, went into it kicking and screaming. I mean, everybody I've talked to have said, it's nothing I ever had on my radar, nothing I ever wanted to do. I hadn't planned to do it, but now that they're into it, they can't get out of it. You know, they don't want to get out of it. And it's very fulfilling. I come from a restaurant background. I mean, so, you know, restaurants and prisons don't go together very well, it would seem, but it certainly is working out well for me.
Pizzas do, though.
Yeah, pizzas
these are sissies.
One thing, just to add on to what Mike was saying, too, the wardens a lot of times are, you know, taking a look at it and saying, I want to hear from other wardens and things like that. We have today with us, he's sitting in the other room, a chaplain from one of the local, one of the Texas prisons, and he had heard about the success of the Malachi Dads program at some other prisons that he would go to preach at. And he actually contacted me and said, what do I need to do to get this up and running? Because he said, I want this here. And I said, well, do you have volunteers that come in? He said, well, we used to, but we don't have that many volunteers in right now. And he said, but I'll do it. And most of the chaplains have their, you know, they're up to their eyeballs in the amount of work that they have to do. But he likes this, has seen its success in other prisons, so much so that he's saying, I'll take time out of my day to make sure that this happens.
And furthermore, he's a former prisoner, so he knows. He gets right inside their heads and inside their hearts, and having a great ministry. So bless you, my dear brother.
One of the other questions I want to ask, Gene, is you've been a former pastor, as anybody would know, and of course, faculty member at Dallas Seminary and other places, but speak, and maybe we'll have to do this after the break. Let me do that after the break, just to the pastors out there that might say, this is a ministry we need to have, but how do I get it done with all the other things I have to do as a pastor, and how do I begin to facilitate that? So I'd love to have you address that issue, but let me just mention, if we're going to the break right now, let's again talk about some of the resources that we have. You can go to our website, pointofview.net, or just go directly to awanalifeline.org. If you want to buy one of those Bibles, and I would encourage you to get multiple Bibles, and you would like to then recognize that every Bible you purchase will then give another Bible to a prisoner, again, that link is BiblePrinciples.org. It's also on our website. But again, those are some ways in which you can make a difference. If you'd like to get some of those resources, maybe you'd like to see Malachi Dads or Hannah's Gift, Again, that's at awanalifeline.org. And Mike Broyles has given us his email, so if you want to write to him, you can do that as well, can't you?
Yes, sir. We'd love to hear from you personally, Mike B. at awana.org.
Well, again, let's take a break. We'll come back, and I'd love to hear Gene Getz talk about that, and maybe talk to some of the pastors out there, because they may have said, I've always wanted to have a ministry, but I really wasn't sure how to get it started, hadn't found any key people, didn't know what kind of curriculum. So we'll talk about that and some of those resources we're making available to you today right after these important messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Supreme Court has announced that it will hear the appeal of Masterpiece Cake Shop. You are probably familiar with at least the broad outline of the facts. A baker is approached to create a product that communicates a message he has a moral objection to creating. It is, unfortunately, an all too familiar refrain these days. Its threat to religious freedom and the freedom of speech should be obvious. Our Constitution guarantees the rights of free exercise of religion and free speech for every American. By granting review of Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, the Supreme Court of the United States has indicated that it wants to consider whether the people of faith who operate a business will be welcome to the public square or driven from it. Americans want a diverse public square that tolerates a variety of beliefs and opinions. We hope the Supreme Court will use this opportunity to protect people like First Liberty clients Aaron and Melissa Klein, who have been forced out of business, penalized $135,000, and even had a gag order issued against them, all because the state of Oregon would not tolerate them operating their business according to their religious conscience. No one should lose their livelihood because the government disagrees with their religious beliefs. Let's hope the Supreme Court makes that abundantly clear. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. You can protect your religious freedom by going to firstliberty.org to download your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit. Our attorneys created kits for churches, ministries, Christian schools, military members, students, and teachers, and the workplace. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Time for a few more minutes, and just before we get any further, I want to come to Gene Getz, former pastor, also faculty member, an individual that, of course, is the individual that put together the Life Essentials Study Bible. But, Gene, what would you say to pastors and church leaders and elders and others who are saying, okay, this is something we need to do, but we're not sure what the next step is?
Well, I think that one of the things is just be aware. Pastors need to be aware of what's going on in the prisons because a lot is beginning to happen.
Yes.
But they need a channel. They need to be able to work with people who have had experience.
Right.
And so I would say Awana Lifeline, seek wisdom, seek advice, because Awana Lifeline, that's their primary ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're learning. And like Burl Cain said, all that Burl learned, and he learned a lot and did a lot. God used him at Angola. He's now taking all of that and learning from, as he said, the things he would do differently and the things they did right. So this takes a lot of experience to be able to do this and have a proper ministry. So I would say get in contact with Mike, Awana Lifeline, get wisdom, get guidance, and get your people involved. And just like the celebrations you have, you know, where you bring, how many did you have at Angola? How many lay people came in to support that ministry?
Yeah, Gene, in Angola State Prison, we have Returning Heart Celebration where the children come in, and we had approximately 600 volunteers from 28 states and 2 foreign countries.
And they come into the prison, and you just don't walk into a prison. I mean,
no, I'm sure of that.
Especially that kind of situation.
Yes.
And all of that has to be vetted and carefully screened and worked out. But to see those 500 or 600 volunteers come in there, and one of the exciting things, my daughter was with me this time, my oldest daughter, and she was sitting in the stands, Mike, where those other prisoners were sitting. These are lifers. She's sitting right in the middle of these guys. And believe me, I was standing down there kind of watching, you know. Here's my daughter sitting in the middle of these lifers, waiting for their children to come in. But that's the kind of environment that is there. But you have to have a contact. You have to have a way into ministry. So I would say, boy, a great place to start is with the Awana Lifeline, because they're learning a lot and they're really doing a lot.
Yes.
And Kirby, one of the other things, I was a family life pastor for 40 years in local churches.
Mm-hmm.
And now I get to be a family life pastor in the prisons and jails. But I would say from a pastor's perspective is one of the most beautiful things is as people in your local church volunteer to come in and teach God's word to these men and women is I'm not sure who gets the most out of this because God used this ministry to transform me. And I have many testimonies of local church people who God's changed them, and He's using them as a volunteer to transfer the grace of God, and there's change in the inmates' heart. But you will find that your people, Pastor, will grow right along with that inmate. And as Gene made a mention of that, the spiritual need in America today, the spiritual revival that's needed in communities and local churches, I have the privilege of seeing transformation, and revival is starting there in the prisons. In a 4-year period in L.A. County jails, in one jail, we baptized 1,500 men in one jail. When's the last time, Pastor, you baptized 75 men at a time? That's how we did it there in L.A. County Jail at South Facilities. So, Pastor, come alongside of us. We'd love to equip and encourage and empower your people to take the gospel to prisoners and their families.
And I'm hungry for it. It's the most fulfilling ministry I think anybody will ever get involved in because they're at the bottom.
Yeah.
There's no place to go, and they're looking for something, and we come in with this, and
they're so appreciative, aren't they?
Yes. Right, and this could be a real mission investment.
Yes,
Kirby, for churches. Awana Lifeline, and because it takes money, they give these books away. They give these materials away. Volunteers pay their own way to come in to this whole situation. So if they're looking for a mission investment that the church could get involved in, Awana Lifeline, I think, is a great mission to be able to do that.
Let's talk about investment for just a minute. We can have the link to BiblePrinciples.org. If people get a copy of the Life Essential Study Bible, the 1,500 different biblical principles, supercultural principles.
1,500 videos built
with
in.
QR codes and all of that. So you'll benefit, but when you buy one, then a second one heads off to one of those prisoners.
That's right. That's the way in which we generate money. Actually, we give the Bibles away. Every Bible we sell, we give one away.
Bob, you're ready to give out a few more Bibles, aren't you?
I am.
He gives out Bibles like tracts.
And these are expensive Bibles. So pretty amazing.
And that's what I have to say, too. I mean, coming from the business world, one of the things that I'm so excited about, and being able to be on both these men's board
is
fantastic because both of them are in it to give things away.
Right.
To get the word out, to whether it's through the Bible or through the Malachi Dads and Hannah's Gift. It's so fulfilling to see that type of work being done. And then being the fact that the two ministries are working so close together, hand in hand, that it's exciting for me to see it.
You'd recommend it to anybody listening right now, wouldn't
I
you?
certainly would.
Mm.
That's right.
Gene, finishes off here. Again, how can people get involved? And we'll again throw it to Mike in just a minute. But again, you've really challenged us to get out of our comfort zone and get involved in this ministry.
Right. Well, I just simply say, explore it. Awana Lifeline is a great place to begin. I can promote it. It's not my ministry. I'm a part of it, but Mike's doing a great job. I've grown through this. I've been in ministry for 60 years, and it's touching my life. Bob, I've seen your life change and grow and strengthen. And just like you say, you can't get involved in prison ministry without being touched and growing yourself. I mean, it's just exciting.
Mike, just one last time, talk about what's available on the website, your email, and we'll encourage people to, as soon as they get off the program here, sign up.
Please join us on our website, awanalifeline.org. We'd love to introduce you to Malachi Dads and Hannah's Gift and Returning Arts. And as been stated by Bob and Gene, we're really a ministry of our hands are open. We give away everything we have because the inmate family doesn't have a lot of resources. So we'd love to have you participate that way. But also, personally, if you're a leader in a church, or you're already working in prisons or jails and want to expand yours, drop me a personal note, mikeb@awana.org. Thanks for letting us come and join in your home or car this afternoon. Thank you.
Guys, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate the ministry, and thanks for giving us an hour of your time.
Thank you.
Just before I run out of time, let me just mention that you can go to our website and find all of the links that we've talked about today, and those are going to be very helpful for you as well. Don't forget that we have some commentaries that we encourage. My commentary today is about GuideStar that had labeled a number of ministries as hate groups and now have withdrawn that, but that's an action item. We also, of course, encourage you to join us every single day. Tomorrow we're going to get back into how to defend the Christian faith. Going to spend a little bit of time looking at some of the issues in the news. We have our Millennial Roundtable on Wednesday, and of course, by the time we get to Friday, we have our weekend edition. So I hope you'll join us every single day here on Point of View. And as you go to the website, don't forget that in order for us to continue bringing these programs to you, we encourage you to join the Truth Team. Click on that button that says donate. Help us out, and anything you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated. I want to thank Andrew and Elisa for their help behind the scenes. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Point of View is committed to spreading the truth, oftentimes a truth that those in political power don't like getting heard. But the only way it can be heard is if our teams stand strong together, if you do what you can to support the Point of View Truth Team. It's having an impact, as we heard recently from U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert.
Everywhere I go, I hear people that you have influenced, that Point of View has affected. You have made such a difference, and you rely on people to contribute, and if they don't contribute, then that truth does not get heard.
Help Point of View make a difference. Pray and consider what level is right for you. $30, $65, $100 a month, or even more. Please do what you can. 1-800-347-5151, or visit online, pointofview.net. Look near the top right for the link that says Become a Monthly Partner. Join the Truth Team, 800-347-5151, and pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank